Hey Ben, I need to get with you today to sign up for that fundraising solution. I haven't had a chance until now. So
Yeah, that's fine.
when you have a chance, do you want to ping me when you have a chance to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
Hey, Justice.
Hello, Benjamin. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. How are you?
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Thank you for
Busy
your
as a one-legged man in a forest fire, as they say.
It is wildfire season here.
Sure is.
Just give me 1 second. I just need to kick out. Okay, we've got a lot of, we got like 6 different AI note takers in here. So hang on a sec. This meeting is already recorded and uses Zoom, which is like our um, vetted AI platform. Folks are really not supposed to use their own bots here. So hang on. Oh, geez, hang on.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning.
Hey, Fali.
I put on my video to show my cool shirt off if while the meeting hasn't started.
Hey, look at that. Tazama. Nice.
Yay, Foley!
Excellent. Did we send you that, by the way? Or did you have to make your
Yes.
own?
Hi, Greg sent
Oh,
me
thank goodness.
some nice shirts.
Hey, awesome. I'm very glad. I remember we were talking about it, and then I couldn't remember if we were actually doing it. So I'm very glad that Greg followed through on that one.
Yeah, he did. And
Nagging
they all fit very well.
off. There was a lot of nagging to be had. Just saying.
Thanks, Michelle.
Do we have you to thank for that, Michelle?
and Sherry, actually.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Folly, did you get to wear it at the conference this week?
Yes, I wore a different Tazama shirt every day. And I had one left over for today.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Not many people, well, no one knew about Tazama, unfortunately, but at least they knew
Next time
about the
we'll see.
Linux
We'll
Foundation.
send you there some stickers so that you can hand them out to people as well. Just come look us up.
Yeah,
Put this on
that
your
would
laptop.
work.
Yeah. Hello, Matt. I'm not too sure where everyone else is, but I suspect maybe let's get going. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Technical Steering Committee meeting for 28th of August. We have a fairly short agenda today, but it is probably going to result in a fairly lengthy presentation. Sandy, I hope you're ready. I did remember to tell you that you're presenting today, right?
Yes, you did.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Are you still sharing? Have you done your antitrust?
Yeah, the antitrust thing is on the screen here. So if you have any questions, concerns about the antitrust policy, please contact your legal counsel. If you are a Linux employee, feel free to contact the Linux legal counsel. Just two things on the agenda today. First things up, we are going to be publishing our current sandbox on a prettier URL. So we have recently updated our sandbox to version 2.2.0. That was done yesterday. So Scott had promoted our new version of the code into production. So the latest version of Tazama, as well as the latest version of the sandbox, has now been rolled out. We are going to prettify the URL that we have been using. So in the future, our community will be able to access sandbox.tazama.org just to be able to navigate and explore the functionality. It kind of saves you from having to deploy your own version of it. And you can also, if you want to, demo the system from there to your own customers. One of the recent changes that we had also made to the sandbox, which is probably quite useful for this purpose, is that you can now have session-based multi-user access from a number of different points of origin to the sandbox. So previously, the original version of the sandbox basically had everybody use it at the same time as the same user, which created some interesting results for some of the people when they didn't know that they were accessing at the same time as somebody else. But we now have a session that manages that. So if you are connecting to the sandbox, you'll have your own instance of it that you can then use and navigate, explore, and demonstrate. And then next up, we want to talk about the Tazama buyer, or the business intelligence, analytics, and reporting space. So this is the work that we have been doing in anticipation of our upcoming Camisa implementation, where we are extending Tazama's functionality with a data warehouse and analytics and reporting ecosystem. So what we are going to be reviewing today is a little bit about the technologies that we are proposing to be using in that space, and also the functionalities and the features that we hope to offer. So I'm going to hand over to Sandy. Sandy, take it away.
Right. I'm gonna share. Right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. All right, so business intelligence, analytics, and reporting. Taking you through a couple of slides before we take a look at our Miro board. But starting with the summary of the overall mission, and that is to unlock the full value of all of the data we'll be collecting in the Tazama environment from both transaction monitoring as well as case management and investigations. And that data to enable insights, evidence generation, decision support, and regulatory compliance. Key components would be the lakehouse, the actual data lakehouse itself, the access mechanisms to access data being the BIR module, Jupyter Labs, and Apache Superset, a vector database for advanced analytics. So those are the three main components to highlight. And then from a strategic value point of view, it's about building a scalable and extensible solution aligned to the mission of accessibility and cost effectiveness. So the architecture, the data sources, as I mentioned, transaction monitoring system, as well as case management investigation. So the operational data stores from those two components. And then in addition to that, case management unstructured data. And here we're talking about metadata only and not the actual audio files or images, etc. And then a last catch-all for external data sources, for example, potentially other KYC or customer data that would want to integrate into the lakehouse. So explicitly choosing to implement a data lakehouse architecture as opposed to a traditional data warehouse. And the rationale for that is really to combine scalability and flexibility the best of both data lakes as well as traditional data warehousing. And this is going to give us a single platform or foundation to support real-time analytics, machine learning, BI, and reporting, all of a single platform. The technology stack is going to be Apache Hoodie and Apache Ozone. And then the BIR module components is Jupyter Lab. So for data science, machine learning environment, we'll be using Jupyter Labs. And then as a self-service tool for non-technical users, proposing Apache Superset. And then from a vector database point of view, proposing Open Search. Key technical principles, so to keep it open source, licensing Apache 2.0 or any other alternatives that are more permissive. Access control integration into Keycloak, role-based access control, supporting multi-tenancy, and then that key architectural decision around storing structured and semi-structured data only. So essentially no unstructured data in the lakehouse. Security-wise, all data in the lakehouse will be unmasked, but when data is extracted to the simulation sandbox for testing or simulation purposes, data will be masked during that extraction process. Integration points, mentioned the simulation sandbox. So integration in the sense that we're going to push data to the simulation sandbox rather than pool-based. And then also synthetic data generation outside of the lakehouse. So the lakehouse will be historical data only and will generate any required synthetic data for testing or benchmarking purposes outside of the lakehouse. Deployment strategy is to be containerized and to support both cloud and on-premise deployments. Stakeholders, so we've looked at the overall architecture to make sure we can meet the requirements of a variety of user categories, from investigators to data scientists, compliance office executives, supervisors, and a wide range of data products. We came up with a classification to try and cover all outputs in the form of reports, dashboards, visualizations, notebooks, data sets, analytical outputs, as well as model outputs. So those are the stakeholders that we're trying to cater for in the design. Our data integration strategy is to have ingestion patterns covering both streaming, trickle feed, and batch. So via continuous flow via NATs, or for small frequent batches or scheduled intervals. As a design principle, we're looking to have source systems push data so that the source systems own the process. From an ETL perspective, looking to have a tiered, layered architecture, moving from a raw layer, bronze layer, silver layer, and gold transformation pipeline. Key objectives around schema validation and preventing drift, ensuring we have Hoodie metadata management and comprehensive auditing and logging in our ETL processes. And then the data migration integration pattern that we've chosen is to move from operational database, essentially move that data to the lakehouse. The information delivery tools that we've looked at, a combination of the self-service alternative, which is Superset, Apache Superset, which is drag and drop, no coding required, to a more technical Jupyter Labs tool set for data science scientists and engineers that can include both code, narrative, and visuals all in a single tool. And then 2 end user tools that we can create dashboards for end users, being investigators or analysts or executives, with drill down components and widget support, those being Voila and Solara. Advanced analytics capabilities, so proposing to use OpenSearch as the vector database, enabling semantic search over structured data, and things like similarity search across entity profiles, so that to enable our anomaly detection and clustering capability. And then the machine learning pipeline, looking at interactive model development in Jupyter Labs with feature engineering and experimentation, and being able to build models and deploy models in that machine learning pipeline. Then to take you through the conceptual design diagram on our Miro board, Justice, if you don't mind sharing that. So switching to Miro so that we can drill into this diagram. So here, bottom right, looking at data sources. So we mentioned both transaction monitoring system as well as case and investigation management, the operational data stores as well as unstructured data being the repository for documents and voice recordings, images, etc. Looking here at the metadata we want to store in the raw layer, using tools like Apache Ticker and Solar to extract the metadata. Did mention NATs for streaming ingestion in our data pipelines from data sources into the raw layer, which would be Apache Hoodie and Apache Ozone. We have included in the diagram recently a use case for external data sources such as audit data that potentially we would want to make available and ingest into the lakehouse for reporting and analytical purposes. The lakehouse itself, as I mentioned, a layered architecture with bronze, silver, and gold layer, with all data being sourced via a staging area in the raw layer. And then in parallel to the lakehouse, the vector database open search, and then moving further up, looking at information delivery tools, the self-service Superset, Apache Superset alternative, as well as the comprehensive Jupyter Labs development environment. Also indicating here, we have recently identified that we will need to ingest data into the Jupyter Labs development environment from some other components that may not necessarily go through the data lakehouse, but that are required for us to do the necessary analytics and reporting that we wanting to be able to do. Then looking closer at the information portal, using components like the Jupyter reporting engine and Jupyter Hub as the access layer. And then showing here, out of our information delivery tools, all of the various outputs and data products that can be generated, and then where those data products are essentially used by the various data consumers here on the left. So, for example, if we look at calibration and anomaly detection, we're expecting that notebooks, Jupyter Lab notebooks, would be used in those two contexts. As part of the design of the case and investigation management solution, reports and dashboards we know are included in the business requirements specification that would be integrated and used by case and investigation management. Things like model management, analytics would source or provide inputs into the alert triage module. So as we optimize and build models to inform the rules and parameterization of alert triage, that would be the analytics outputs or data products. And then when we doing analytics and building models to identify other rules that potentially we could build, those would be an input into the rule builder or the Tazama Rule Studio that PACES is in the process of developing. And then, for example, data sets and synthetic data sets being outputs that would be ingested into or pushed into the simulation sandbox for the purposes of testing or be able to replicate rules and performance, etc. Questions, comments?
Yeah, actually, I have a quick question. First off, great presentation, lots of information. The question I had was, and give me some grace here because I'm not as familiar with this stuff as everyone else is, but the most likely scenario, right, is that you have companies implementing their own instances of Tazama, right? So you've got multiple instances of Tazama running all over the place, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then, so I think what's being presented here is that this is like part of the, you know, they would install this along with like Tazama and everything else, right? Or this comes with it, basically. But you're not hosting this, right? This is all up to the implementer to handle, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So my question is, you know, how modular is this? And the reason I ask that is because looking at this, I would assume that a lot of the folks who are implementing Tazama might have existing solutions for some of these things. And so the use case I was thinking of was someone implementing Tazama that has their own data lake already. So is this, is that accounted for? Have you thought about that? If so, I'm curious what you were thinking. And is this particularly modular so folks can pick and choose what they want? So what's your thinking there?
Yeah, we envision that a lot of people will have something already. But this is, well, it is really part of the commit, it's a spec. So we have to deliver this basically. This is one of those things that goes into that spec. I'll shut it down and let Sandy talk, but yeah, we do envision this. Some people will have their own environment.
Yeah, so certainly tools would be modular, and it would be pick or replace or use other BI types of tools. I think the idea with having a raw staging layer and landing all of the data there is that would make it easier to integrate into an alternative warehouse or data lake solution. No,
If
Greg,
I may
anything else
also
to
just
add?
comment on the
Yeah.
modularity here. So in essence, if you look at, and Sandy, I don't know if you actually have a picture of that somewhere, but the entire ecosystem of functionality that we are proposing to implement to be able to meet the requirements of the CMISA RFP. Okay, cool. There it is, right? So the data warehousing component is effectively the part at the bottom in this diagram and then the part at the top right. So those two pieces almost together, if you wanted to use your own data warehousing for that, then you could potentially just circumvent this and not install it. So that entire section is intended to be modular, but then you are going to be on the hook for your own integration into your own data warehouse. You're going to have to build your own reporting for it. We do find, though, that a lot of people are already using Jupyter Labs or Jupyter Notebooks anyway. So maybe they only need to replace the actual database or data warehousing infrastructure, and then the rest of the stack they could potentially still reuse. But we found in our initial engagement with customers, in particular in our focus area for financial inclusion, is a lot of people have absolutely nothing available already. They are looking for almost a comprehensive solution. So we felt like we were a little bit on the hook to be able to provide something that is functional out of the box and complete. And then if people want to whittle away at that because of pieces of technology they already have or things that they are more familiar with, they are more than welcome to use those. But then, as I said, they're going to have to handle their own integration and their own operation of those components. So you don't have to take this with Tazama. It is certainly going to be built specifically to make your Tazama experience more rich and more comprehensive. But how you decide to deploy it is entirely up to you in the end. It's also worth mentioning maybe here that a lot of these components will provide a framework for future content. So we expect that we will be delivering the data warehousing solution that is integrated, that is ready to be able to receive data from the Tazama operational data store and the case and investigation management operational data store, and that will be, let's call it, pre-integrated. But then there may be some reports already that we can anticipate people might be interested in, and we would build those as part of the open source deployment. But people will then add their own products. Implementations will come with their own requirements for specific products. People may have specific templates that they need to complete in order to meet the requirements of their own individual regulators or law enforcement requirements or audit requirements. So we don't propose to pre-deliver all of that functionality for everybody in anticipation of demand. We deliver the tools and the framework, and then when an implementation happens, people can populate it with their own content.
Thanks, Justice. Any other questions, comments?
Yes, on one of your first slide, you mentioned that a requirement for all the tools will have to be able to integrate with Keycloak for authentication. And I just want to double check the idea is there to maintain the tenancy ID in order to make sure all the data in the data lakehouse, no matter how many iterations and tools and processes they go through, keeps their tenancy as the source, and that all the tools that we propose to give access to view that data will always be hard coded to include the tenancy ID in any views or any queries or anything that you built. And I just want to double check that that is actually possible.
Yeah, that's the
Yes.
intention. Whether it's possible, I don't know whether we've done all the detailed analysis and have our hands in it yet to know whether that's 100% doable or not. Justice?
No, that is certainly the intent. That's also why we wanted to get the multi-tenancy functionality done as quickly as possible right up front of our Camisa features project. On the original project plan, we actually had it located a little bit later, but we brought it forward right up front so that we can meet that dependency everywhere else in the platform so that we can save ourselves the rework later.
Good luck. I'm glad.
Thanks.
I'm glad the intent is there. Good to hear.
Yeah, you can always refer to the raw layer, which is just the JSON message, through and do that through HUDing and OSM. But we envision that it'll be transformed through the rest of the DP.
I'm interested in many of the tools, but I'm specifically interested in the open search, how you're going to let it know that any queries can only give me data based on the principled user.
We are going to figure that out. So ultimately, the way that we have implemented multi-tenancy in the core platform is to segregate the data by tag, right? All the way down from the users of that data, the rule processors, people who are submitting data into the platform, and then also how the data itself is stored in the database. From a certain perspective, that does not necessarily lend Tazama the PCI DSS and the ISO 27001 compliance. Those systems prefer that you basically segregate this data physically, not just logically the way that we are currently doing it. I imagine that some of these other tools may also prefer to lean more towards physical separation than logical separation, but we'll get to that as we go through it. I suspect, we haven't checked, but some of them may also, like Postgres now, be able to offer record level access so that if you have a user that is authenticated for a specific sort of a claim or a role, you can constrain their access to the data based on that claim, which may actually help a little bit because you don't have to do it via a tenant ID filter in your query. The user's role will define what data in the database they have access to at the database layer, which I think is slightly better. Ultimately, if somebody is so intent on complete physical separation of their data by tenant, the option is also that they can just employ their own instance of Tazama all the way end to end, so that they are the sole tenant of their multi-tenancy environment, which kind of defeats the purpose of multi-tenancy. But that is, I would guess, the worst case scenario for a multi-tenancy implementation if you need full physical separation of your data. And also because there's no license fees involved in any of these components, the only cost really is in the deployment and the infrastructure cost, not in the licensing of any of the software. So hopefully the business case for full logical separation by separate instances is acceptable.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And I
And
think the
then,
implementation using Postgres, I think there's a very easy compliance answer, and that would probably make them happy, saying you implement row-level security. But I'm worried about all the toolings on the screen. And but probably not all the tenants will require this, but the ones that do, we might have to find a way to separate the data once it goes through the ETL process.
yeah. So to give everybody an idea as well, when we started looking at this problem, we were like, no, it's easy. We're going to build a data warehouse, right? And it's how many tools could you possibly need to build a data warehouse? And then when we started to actually unpack the technical stack for a data warehouse, we very deliberately tried to keep it as light as possible here. And we still ended up with more different technologies in the stack than we currently have in the entire Tazama core platform. So it is kind of a composite of a number of different tools. We tried to select tools that are already well known for being able to collaborate. And that's why you'll see a lot of the tools here are actually from the Apache stack. We thought when we looked at the available tools that there were, the Apache stack offered a very comprehensive set of functionalities, even like variations on the same tool, still within the Apache stack that offers functionality. So, Apache Hoodie is somewhat closely related also to Hadoop, and there's a whole lot of functionalities that are almost synonymous but highly specialized for a specific purpose, and all of these sit within the Apache stack. So we definitely wanted to keep these tools interoperable. We tried to keep the stack as simple as we possibly could keep it. And also OpenSearch, I think, is one of the newer tools in the Linux stable, which is something that we thought might also be great to add to the stack specifically for the vector database. In particular, a vector database kind of gives our signal towards the AI and machine learning future that we are all building towards. The vector database in particular at the moment is probably the only one of these components that is still optional. But as soon as we start doing AI and machine learning work in the system, that is the database that we would recommend should be used for that purpose. So it is a complex stack. But it really is as simple as we could make it. If anybody has any suggestions or things that we maybe should have considered, there is still time for us to have a look at those. So please feel free to let us know. But at the moment, this is the stack that we intend to go with. All right, how are we doing? Any other questions, comments?
Looks like Colin.
Yep.
had-
I guess from
Colin?
me, hi everyone. So
Hello.
maybe just to make sure that I understood properly. So the idea is to ensure that post or beyond the Comesa project, that the transaction monitoring solution that we have is all inclusive of case management, correct?
Yes, definitely case management. But Sandy, if you could go back to that diagram quickly, it might be useful just to say where we are drawing the boundaries for sort of optional components, right? So the Tazama transaction monitoring system is always going to be our core system. So it is the detection engine that we would at least want somebody to be able to use. If you are using the Tazama transaction monitoring service, we are giving you a case management system that is pre-integrated with that service and allows you to do the investigations based on signals from the Tazama core. You could, in theory, implement your own case management system here if you wanted to implement it or connect it to the Tazama signal stream. But also, in theory, you could plug in your own transaction monitoring system into the Tazama case management system so that you can use the Tazama case management system for transaction monitoring. So those are probably two of the biggest integrated components that can both stand alone. The data warehousing stack, we don't really see as a standalone component. We think that, yes, people might be able to use their own data warehousing stack instead, but it seems unlikely at this point that they would use the Tazama data warehousing stack without any of the Tazama components. So that component, while it is optional, is very much built specifically for Tazama. Somebody will have their own data warehousing stack, and there are a number of variations of that out there in the wild. A lot of people use a lot of different things anyway. So ours is, while perhaps not necessarily unique, it is also not particularly special, right? So anybody can use their own data warehousing stack. Then the top layer of tools that we have, the rule builder module, which we are now calling the Tazama Rule Studio, the integration software development kit, which we are now calling the Tazama Connection Studio. Those components make using Tazama a lot easier. It's an accelerator for implementation and deployment, and also for the ongoing maintenance of the system. Those components, you could probably hand build your own Tazama integration. That's always still possible, and you could hand build your own rule processors, but our tools will allow you to do that through a user interface. So I think those are probably less optional components. You probably want to use those with Tazama to manage and maintain the system. So in terms of the sort of the main classes of optional components here, there's the Tazama core detection service and its configuration services. There's the case management system, and then there's the data warehousing stack. So choose all three would be our suggestion, but if you really didn't want the data warehousing, that's up to you.
Okay, great. And I guess the case workflows within the case management would be customizable, right? For example, escalations, approvals, SLA tracking, etc. Those would be customizable.
That's actually a very good question, because customization means a lot of different things to different people. And we actually had this conversation when we started doing our requirement specifications. But
Phone is laughing, by the way.
Yeah, yes. So what we're aiming for here is a baseline of system functionality that will meet the requirements for somebody who doesn't really know what they want, right? They've never done this before. They need a case and investigation management system, and they basically want that process to be put on rails for them. So out of the box, the Tazama case and investigation management system comes with workflows for sort of a ACFE appropriate fraud investigation process and a FATF appropriate money laundering. And we're not really focusing on the financing of terrorism here, but to a large extent, those processes are similar. So there's a FATF equivalent money laundering investigation process. And those are the things that we think people could use out of the box. So in theory, because we are using the flowable engine, the workflows themselves are to a certain extent customizable. So if you wanted to change the process to meet your own internal business processes, you will be able to do that. But that's going to be more of a coding exercise, because you have to change the configuration of flowable. Right. So for me, that is not so much configurable. It is something that you can change, but it's probably closer to a development exercise. Right. So it's not particularly locked down. But things like creating different queues or expanding the number of queues or being able to route specific types of investigation alerts to specific types of users or queues, those things are configurable in the system, because you can set up your own queues, you can set up your own worker groups, you can those things. That level of configuration is ultimately possible in the system, and that's what we are aiming for. So to be able to do that, configuration is more the operational configuration of the system as it exists. Beyond that, you are somewhat in developer territory.
No, it makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, Colin, it's the engine actually supports BPMN out of the box and supports the CMMN and also supports CMN. So in theory, you could do that, but it's just that developers going to probably do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, if you will, we're really just a wrapper on top of what they've already got. And in the investigation flows.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I can't actually see the participants thing. There we go. We don't have anything else on our to-do list for today. If there are no other questions from our audience, thank you very much, Sandy, for the overview. If anybody, as always, thinks of something to ask later or has a comment to drop, please do so. At the moment, everybody has access to the guest link on the Miro board. I think that guest link will be active for a while, so feel free to browse around. Please don't make any changes. But if you have any comments later, please do let us know.
Right. Thank you very much, Justice Andy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Looks good.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fali.